Good afternoon, everyone. This Tuesday, September 19th, 2023 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councilors Burdick.
Here.
Rapp.
Here.
Afghan.
Here.
Corrigan. Here. Wendland.
Here.
And Mboop.
Here. Thank you. Now, everyone, will you please stand and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation. It's a beautiful day. We are going to start this afternoon with an update from the Arts Council on the LORAC project percent for the art program status. We welcome Ms. Nathan. Good afternoon.
Is that all right? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, good
Okay,
afternoon.
great. So I'm here to provide a brief update on the 1.5% for art project at the Recreation and Aquatics Facility. Bruce Powers is here as well. The staff report that you had in your packet pretty much summarizes where the committee is to date with the process, but I'll be adding just a few bits of information and visuals. So as you can see, part of section 5.11 from the public art guidelines, the process is laid out pretty clearly as to what happens with a 1.5% project like this. So you can see there, upon initiation of the 1.5%, the Public Art Committee and the Arts Council shall confirm the available budget and timing. Timing of funds will dictate when the projects can be initiated. Identify site or sites for the works of art, identify the goals of the project, including those outlined by the participating department and any artist prerequisites, and convene a selection committee. So all of these 4 things have been accomplished, and I have some additional information on each of those. So as you'll see here, the budget for the entire project is broken out on the slide here and includes both the all 3 things, the LORAC, the golf course, and the annex, which are all contributing to the overall 1.5%. So the 1%, or what's highlighted there, $133,000 and $314 will be dedicated to the artwork, artist fees, labor and materials, permits needed, any travel, documentation, insurance, professional fees, installation, transport, those hard costs. The 0.5%, or $66,657, is for administration of the overall public art program, accessioning, conservation, maintenance, community education, and registration of public art. So the total that's come together for this particular project is just under $200,000. So this slide and the next one are, note the locations, which were provided to the selection committee by the project team and include both indoor and outdoor possible locations. Now I know that slide is a little bit hard to see. The preferred interior and exterior artwork as potential locations were determined and are being considered throughout the process. 2 additional art locations were determined feasible in August 2023 as construction began to take place on the property. 1 location you'll see there is alongside the plaza area, and another was identified along the pathway to the first tee on hole 1 in a landscape area in the golf course. So this was an attachment that was in your packet as well. So this is a new location, this is a new location, and then there are the other locations are here, 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 and there. So there's the entryway and a planting, the Stafford pathway, the pool entry, cloverleaf path juncture in front of landscape screening, corner of the parking lot at the top of the slope, and the seating area at the stormwater pond. So this slide again shows, kind of shows an overview from top down and shows both interior and exterior options. Number one here, you'll see just outside the entrance is noted as Going for Your Vision, which is a sculpture which exists in the collection right now. Numbers 4, you'll see 4, 4, and 4. That represents roughly about 1,500 square feet of glass at the upper reaches of the building where bird-safe glass patterns could be utilized. Number 6 is an interior spot, and that could be for a panel or framed art, or it could be something like you see here, a standalone piece either with a screen or some sort of component integrated, which would connect all the artwork at the LORAC. So be able to say, you know, here's what you see, here are these 5 pieces, here's how they're connected, here's what they mean, things like that, a little bit of interpretive information. This is, of course, obviously dependent upon budget and what's being allocated for the exterior work. These displays are nice because they're movable, they allow for rotating information, they're a concentrated location. You could go for one bit of information. Those would run probably about $3,000 each. So those are locations. The project goals and objectives that PAC worked with the project folks on are artwork should blend with the thematic context of the building, i.e. exercising and reinforce the goals of the building. Artwork should be complementary to the architectural design and landscaping. Interactive artwork or artwork which incites community engagement while being sure to incorporate accessibility is key. This will bring balance to the city's art collection and honor the overall theme of accessibility at LORAC. And artwork should speak to the diverse communities who will be utilizing the building as well as speak to their diverse physicalities. So those are the goals. And then the selection committee membership, again, this comes from the Public Art Guidelines, section 511.1. And so that lets us know whom needs to be on the committee. So 4 members of the Public Art Committee, 1 of whom shall serve as chair. So the chair is Shane Kucera. The members are Manju Bhatia, Nan Robertson, and Lauren O'Neill. A neighborhood or business representative, that's Rachel Rittman. City staff representative is Jan Wertz from Parks, and an architect or engineer is Kara Grothen from SEA. Jennifer Marsasek is also there as an option if needed. So artwork that currently exists in the city's collection that are possibilities for this site include Going for Your Vision, as well as, and again, as we noted, it would be visible in the landscaping as you approach the entrance. Other options include a recent donation from the family of Michihiro Kosuge. He was a very important regional and nationally known stone sculptor. He was the art department chair for many years at Portland State and influenced not only a generation of artists during that time, but a lot of different folks from the area. His work can be found locally at PCC Sylvania campus, the TriMet Transit Mall near PSU, the Kaiser Foundation in Vancouver, Washington County Justice Center, just to name a few. And he has had a number of exhibitions over the years. He was a represented artist at Laura Russo and Russo Lee Gallery for a long time. His partner was Laura Russo. So you'll see some of the very basic costs that are associated with either relocating these pieces or getting these pieces installed. So a concrete pad for Going for Your Vision, transportation of that piece, installation and transportation of some of the Kosuge pieces. So that comes to roughly about $9,100. So there's Going for Your Vision to remind you all what that looks like. That piece was at the site where the gateway piece is right now, and so that was removed, and it was actually repowder coated. So it is shiny and new and ready for reinstallation. These are some of the kosuge pieces that could potentially be utilized. This is what we're calling kind of a bench piece. That the piece you see that's the larger cylindrical piece, that's about 6 feet long. The other one that goes with it is probably more about 3 to 4 feet. These pieces, minus the moss, they are roughly, it's called lava, and they have really interesting texture to them. And each of these is about 4 by 4 feet, so they're actually quite large. They were fun to try and move. This one is called I See You, Hear You, and Kiss Me. That was a piece that Michihiro made in dedication to Laura Russo. And that piece, the city was able to obtain as well. This is another spherical piece of granite. And this is the piece at the site, so it was in situ with a lot of bamboo around it, but it's a lobed piece fragment from Nature number 5. So those are some of the pieces that could potentially be utilized at the site. So where the selection committee is currently is to meet on September 27th to continue to move forward with the selection process. So this includes, you can see the agenda here. We've had some questions in regard to bird-safe glass and costs. So we've been trying to obtain that information so that we can make so the selection committee can make an informed decision going forward whether that will fit inside the budget. So Triplet Wellman is supposed to be getting us an estimate via Jan Wirtz, and then we have also, ACLO staff have also done some research and reached out to some other folks who do this sort of work, including Glass Pro, Surface Products, and then I happen to be at the Research Center in Beaverton for a conference, and they have some bird-safe decals as well, so I asked them about that information. So that will be kind of where we will be going next, and that will determine how we can move forward if the bird-safe glass is indeed within the budget or not. So that meeting will be kind of our determination, and then we will be scheduling subsequent meetings from there on out. So as a result, that's where we are at the moment. Bruce will be joining us at the September 27th meeting, and yeah, we look forward to seeing Going for Your Vision at the LORAC and whatever might else end up there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Nathan. So this bird safe glass, is that the glass itself to be made bird safe so that you can then add these decals on top of it, or?
There's a couple different methodologies as I understand it. There's a way that you can put a decal on the exterior or interior of the glass, but there are some questions as to whether that negates the warranty. So that's a question.
And the decal is the art.
The decal, yes, then becomes the art. So that is designed by an artist, and then it's applied in whatever way, shape, or form. So it can be a decal, it can be basically like a frit. The glass is pressed into a pattern, and a screen has to be made, so it's kind of like screen printing. So then the cost comes into producing a screen, because basically you're making a piece of artwork
Right.
that then is applied to the glass. So it's a really intensive process. So it could be very, very expensive and not within the budget of the.
Is it the decal itself that is then bird safe?
What it does is it creates a pattern so that birds are less attracted to fly into it.
Oh, so dual purpose. It's a nice piece of art and it makes bird safe.
Yes. So if you are if you are at the Reeser, and you by chance go up, all of their glass from the ground floor up to the upper reaches is all covered in small dots. That prevents birds from flying into it. Another instance you can see is at the TriMet Max stop in Westmoreland. So there's a tower that goes from the bypass down to the Max station. That artwork is by Dana Lynn Lewis, and the panes of glass there are patterned, and that's to help alleviate birds.
Well, thank you and the committee for the work so far on all of this. And we have on the consent agenda approval of folks just to the Public Art Committee in general, which is great to see. And it was great to see updates on the website too in regards to this project. Very easy to follow along and to be engaged. And so with the money that we're going to invest, we're using some additional art, so we'll be able to kind of have even more art at the LORAC than we would otherwise, using pieces of the existing collection in this donation.
Theoretically, yeah, that would actually, stretch the budget a little bit more, as if we could utilize the pieces that are already in the collection, and then this donation. It was really, it was a very generous donation of these pieces. The cost that were incurred were just to move it here and store it. So, but we will utilize them either here or in other upcoming projects.
Okay, that's great. Okay, questions, Councilor Raff?
I'm really spinning on the bird safe glass. I can't figure this out. So are we already putting the bird safe glass in? Or this would be something that the Arts Council, part of their budget, would install?
No, we are not. The initial estimates we got, Nicole's been very politic about it. The initial estimates we got were well above budget for the bird safe glass. So I'm glad that they're doing additional research to find out if there are alternative ways to deliver. But yeah, it was thought that it would be part of the public art project. But as I say, right now the cost exceeds what we have available.
Okay, so what they're saying is part of their strategic objective of the LORAC would be they would like to spend their budget on bird safe glass as well as art. And in some situations, it's the bird safe glass and the art are one piece.
Yes, the artistic component.
You spend
of
money
the-
on bird safe glass.
The
in addition to
artistic
art.
component of the bird safe glass would be what would be the primary, one of the primary pieces of
For the
art.
literal installation of bird safe glass, you would use some of your funds to install in the LORAC.
Well, that's a great question for Bruce.
I mean, sort of.
Glass is going in regardless.
Right,
Glass
glass is
has to
going
go
But if it's
in.
bird safe glass, what I'm saying is I'm wondering, okay, it's a prioritization exercise. Do you spend the money that you have on just art? Or do you choose to put fewer pieces of art, but put more money to installing this special glass?
If it were up to me,
Right, yeah,
I would say not do bird safe glass.
okay.
I would recommend, doing something else, having other pieces that were more visibly available and not in a place where you wouldn't necessarily see them. I think you could get more for your money for the $133,000.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna lead to is, it's a choice. You have a certain amount of money, do you do glass or do you art? So, okay.
Yeah,
That
and you have
checks
to-
that box off.
Yeah, you have to decide the highest and best use.
Exactly, okay. We have existing pieces, okay, and then are you gonna go source additional pieces? Or are we just using existing pieces that we already have for art?
No, I don't, I think, again, it depends on budget, but
Right.
the intent would to have a mix of one or two maybe existing pieces, and then go out and either purchase other pieces or have those commissioned.
True, okay. For those new pieces, do you have any intention of those pieces representing real people?
No.
Not this time? Okay. My only recommendation would be for any pieces that are inside the LORAC, because obviously we want to have places where people can sit, socialize, et cetera. Some of these pieces are really large. Some of these pieces they look like benches, but I don't know about you, but I feel weird about sitting on art that's intended to be sat on. So let's just be mindful of taking up space and being, large pieces versus small pieces and making sure we're managing the flow of people using the space. So, thank you.
Thank you,
Definitely.
Councilor Raff. Councilor Windley.
I just want to thank the committee for stepping up and helping out, making things happen. It's always a fun exercise to try to figure out what you put into a space, and I think this is a great committee to do so. A couple of questions on the rock pieces. You're putting those outside kind of all over which is really kind of neat.
That would be the intention, is that those would be outdoor pieces for the most part. There are smaller pieces, but I would say the majority of those really work better outside as part of the landscaping.
Okay. And then as far as if you have the bird safe glass, let's just say you go down that, how do you determine what then goes on? Is it a permanent art piece, or is it something to be rotated every 5 years, or how does that work?
That would be more a permanent art piece, because what would happen is the design was made, and that's where the real cost, a lot of the cost comes in, is that those screens for the design to be made, you don't want to be making those all the time because those are cost prohibitive. So you make one screen, two screens, and then you can alternate that throughout the project, and then, get a pattern or some sort of artistic representation that's up there. So that would be more of a permanent piece.
Okay, and those are for the windows that are kind of higher above?
Yeah, they're up on that.
Or-
As I understand it, they're up on the upper reaches of the 2 or 3-story pool area.
Right. Okay. So I'm hoping it's super expensive, so we go on to a different. I think it's a neat idea. I just think it's very costly for what I would call, I'm not sure how to put it, eyes on art ratio would be smaller to the value of eyes on art throughout. So anyway, we'll just wait for the next update.
Yes, it would lead to the installation of birds on grass in front.
Right.
Yeah, an interesting piece.
Well, but I do, and one thing on the art, I mean, in the sense that we do want it from the criteria of representing somewhat of the LORAC area. And I know we're paying for it with the city money portion, so the district portion is not included, just so everyone understands that part. But we are putting in a swimming complex that everybody will be using, and so I would hope that we have in the equation honoring the swimmers of the world to a certain extent, and even if we can help the district, so they have some art. I mean, it's all of our pool, but I guess the idea is that it's been a long time. I think it's almost been 60 years or 55 years since the last pool was built, and it would be nice to somehow incorporate something. We have a number of swimming themes in Lake Oswego between the lake, and that's one of the reasons why I think people were supportive, is that we enjoy water activities and water sports, and just make sure that it is not anything art towards Lake Oswego or Lake Ridge. It has to be if it is, and water polo and swimming are both sports. So anyway, just make sure you watch the high school politics of aquatic sports. Anyway,
Thank you, Councilor Whitland.
thank you.
Noted.
Thank you, Councilor Burdick.
Well, Councilor Wendland and Raff pretty much asked my questions, but I just wanted to thank you and the committee for all the work so far. I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of what other pieces we come up with, because there's a lot of locations I think can really make the space even more amazing. I think I'm kind of leaning with Wendland and Raff, though, I love the idea of having the bird safe glass, but if it's going to take away from the art that's really going to be seen in the rest of the facility, as you stated, that's an important balance to kind of take into account, so.
Thank you, Councilor Burdick. If there is, because of the widespread use of the facility, the future use of the facility by students, if there is any way to incorporate student feedback and participation in the selection, I know the committee's been seated, but if they can, interface with the student body, especially those, centered around art, that would be great, or even student art as part of the project would be even better. So thank you for keeping that in mind.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Ms. Nathan. Okay, well, we really appreciate you being here today. Thank you for this great update.
Thanks.
Great to hear all this. So next we have a proclamation for Meals on Wheels Month, which is actually next month in October, but we like to plan ahead and prepare for the city's celebration, recognition of Meals on Wheels Month, and the effort that takes place in the community during the month of October to raise money for this worthwhile organization. So I'm going to read some of the proclamation here. There is a need to ensure that no senior goes hungry or suffers from social isolation in Lake Oswego. The need for home-delivered meals will only increase as nearly 44% of Lake Oswego residents are 50 and older. 95% of seniors want to remain independent and in their own homes as they age. Meals on Wheels allows seniors to stay in their home at least 2 years longer. The program was started in Lake Oswego in 1972 by 7 people. The city of Lake Oswego memorialized its commitment to Meals on Wheels in 2004 by partnering with the nonprofit board Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels. The program engages 155 Lake Oswego volunteers in meaningful service to others. And there's more than 18,000 made-from-scratch nutritionally balanced meals served annually to senior and disabled Lake Oswegans each year. So as mayor with my colleagues on the council, we're proclaiming the month of October as Meals on Wheels Month in Lake Oswego and urging all residents in our community to celebrate older adults and the Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels program that supports healthy aging in Lake Oswego. And we're honored to have representatives of Meals on Wheels here, and I'm going to ask Lynn Brokaw to come forward, and we're going to give you a copy of our proclamation.
Get the opportunity to say something?
Yes, oh yes, of course.
Oh, good. We really appreciate this recognition and the designation of October as being Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels Month. And I don't think most people really realize the importance of this program. And this month gives us the opportunity to go to the businesses, to the individuals, to the restaurants in order to help collect donations to pay for the meals that we serve. We serve around 20,000 meals a year to these people, and at the cost of almost $10 a meal each time now, which gets very expensive. And the city allows us to give us the money to then have this program, and then we have to raise the money to pay back the city for the program. And we've been able to do that for the last few years. It's either $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, depending on the situation. And we really want to thank you for that. And I think it would be a great opportunity for some of you, if you're ever interested. I drive every Wednesday and deliver meals, and I've done that for about 15, 20 years now. And you're invited to come ride with me to see the importance of why we're delivering to these people that really need it. And if these people are in a situation where they can't pay for it, we don't charge them. We give them a bill each month, and they will send the money, or they don't, and we don't come after it. So it's really needed. I've had people that, as I delivered, that people I get there and knock on the door, and nobody answers. And finally, here's something, and luckily, in most cases, the door was open, walk in, they're on the floor. And so I was there to help, call 911, get them some help. And it's only because Meals on Wheels is there to help them survive too, not only for meals, but their physical survival. So it really benefits the whole program. It benefits us, and we appreciate you guys, this designation, and allowing us to do this every year, and us then pay you back. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for being here. Thank you, and thank you, Malcolm. We appreciate it. Next on the agenda is public comment. If you're here to provide public comment and haven't already done so, please fill out one of these white slips in the back of the room and hand it to Ms. Linder. I'll call you forward. Please just state your name and speak into the microphone, state your name. You'll have up to 3 minutes to share your thoughts with the council. And we have the little timer to monitor the time. We appreciate everyone keeping track of that. So first up, we have Mr. Robert Heap. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you here.
Also, thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving the opportunity for me to comment today. My comments are related to Reseek and the work being currently done to make a sewer connection for the Reseek Park. Our P&A neighbors asked me to come before Council and ask for Council's continued support and direction to staff to work with us to minimize the impacts of removal of trees and landscaping in a utility easement area on private land adjacent to the sensitive lands area in Reseek. This again is to connect the sewer, which makes sense and was always part of the plan. I think what surprised many in the neighborhood was just the intensity of what the sewer connection actually entails. We've learned that it's going to take some trees being removed in order to get the boring equipment in. And then because of the nature of the grading and the gravity flow of the sewer, it's going to require a pretty extensive boring pit to bore the connection towards the north to make the sewer connection. So with that, I think we just wanted to share a little bit of background. We held a meeting and we collected comments and questions. We provided that to staff and council. So thanks to staff and council for looking at that and trying to address the residents' concerns. Staff has been wonderful to work with, and that's really our ask. It's just that we can continue to work with them and find solutions, and if council can direct staff to continue to work with us. So again, just a little bit of background, and I'll make this short. In 2008 is when the development was done, and it's a 40,000 square foot common area that belongs to the HOA. There is approximately 100 foot by a 40 foot easement area, utility easement, where this work is being proposed to be done. At the time, the area was approved for development. There was requirements, pretty prescriptive, and again, not by this administration, this is going back to 2008, but there was some pretty prescriptive requirements to say, professionally landscaped trees and plants should be put in the area. You must put in irrigation to make sure that those trees and plants were sustained, and now they're mature. It's really nice, they're pretty big, but unfortunately they're in the utility easement, which looking back on it probably wasn't the best idea. So, sometimes people comment like, why in the world did you guys put plants in a utility easement? That's a no-no, but it wasn't us, it was part of the development before many of the residents ever got there. So I think part of what's being asked is members feel there's an absolute opportunity to lessen the impact to save trees. With the boring pit, it's going to be deep, a lot of dirt's going to be removed, and so I think the first kind of thought was, well, can we just store that soil that's being removed for the boring pit in this utility easement area? And you do that, it requires more trees to be removed. So there are some opportunities, I think, to save more of the landscaping and trees, but it requires some trade-offs, and that's really it. I mean, what kind of trade-offs are we willing to make to save the trees? Fast development, the overall connection of the sewer system for the skate park, could that be delayed? Like at Rossman Park, they actually in the southeast corner have more of a portable type of system. Could that be done temporarily until, we look at, better options? So I'll keep it here. I think there's one more comment from our P&A land liaison, Chris, who's going to comment. But again, thank you for all the work. We really look forward to working with council, and we hope we can, save some trees and landscaping here.
Thank you, Mr. Heap. You do a good job working with your neighbors. We appreciate you kind of coalescing the comments and continuing to work with the team at the city. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. And Chris. Good afternoon. Glad to have you here as well.
Honorable Mayor Buck, council members, and staff, good afternoon. Thank you for your service to our beautiful community. I'm Chris Durkee. I reside at 2356 Glen Haven Road in Palisades. I'm the land use coordinator for the Palisades Neighborhood Association, but I speak today as an individual, not representing the neighborhood association. Given how quickly this issue has evolved, there hasn't been time to distribute my statement and get consensus, but I believe the board would support it. But technically, I'm speaking as an individual. My comments draw on my 40-year experience in commercial construction and development. Several of my projects have involved horizontal boring, similar to the process we're using to run the sewer line under Pecan Creek. I want to address two issues today. One is the impact to sensitive lands, and the second is the restoration of landscaping, as Rob mentioned, removed at the easement. So first, sensitive lands. Construction impact around and under Pecan Creek is severe, with the potential for irreparable harm. The creek has been left untouched for many years. Wildlife has proliferated, such as the beaver family and their little dam. I encourage the city to engage a qualified third party to review and critique the sewer construction plan in sequence with the intent of confirming its validity and identifying any additional measures which could be taken to protect this fragile area. Second, landscape restoration. If a sewer line ran under a brick wall and the brick wall had to be removed to allow for that sewer line, it's reasonable to expect the brick wall would be replaced, repaired with similar brick. If a sewer line went under architectural paving, it's reasonable to assume that the architectural paving would be restored to its original condition, not asphalt. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the landscaping in this easement, designed by a landscape architect, maintained at considerable expense by the neighbors, would be restored to its original condition, not with replacement trees. So I encourage Parks and Rec and their contractors to restore the landscaping at the easement on Sienna Drive to its original condition with the same species and sizes of trees that are there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durkee. Appreciate you being here. Is there anyone else who provide comment? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight is Resolution 23-04. This is a resolution of the City Council approving the co-chair appointments to the Public Art Committee. Have item 6.2, which is Resolution 2339. It's a resolution of the City Council initiating proceedings to vacate the public interest in that portion of the 6-foot wide pathway that's located northwesterly of the railroad right-of-way of Union Pacific Railroad from Boones Ferry Road, northeasterly approximately 759 feet to the westerly line of 5014 Upper Drive, and authorizing the city recorder to give notice of a public hearing. And we have item 6.3, which is approval of the 2023-24 Neighborhood Enhancement Program grant application from the first edition Neighbors Forest Hills as recommended by the NEP Award Committee. And item 6.4, which is approval of meeting minutes from July 18th. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda with one comment.
Second.
Yes.
I would just like to call out our city recorder, Carrie Linder, for an exceptional job. I reread the July 18th minutes that were, I think, 26 or 28 pages long. And I know that sometimes we go through long, long meetings as a council that sometimes last way beyond the mark of time. But it's all recorded, and after I read through the meeting and relived it again, I just really appreciated everything that Carrie does to ensure everything's recorded. So anyway, with that, I do move that the consent agenda is accepted and approved.
Second.
The second from Councilman. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Our motion passes 7-0. Okay, we are now going to move into a study session. This is item 8.1 on the Vertical Housing Development Zone Pilot Program. We invite Mr. Olson to join us. Good afternoon.
Vertical housing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon, Mayor Buck and City Council. I'm here today to talk to you about a new tool that the city is considering employing to produce housing in key areas, and that's known as vertical housing or the Vertical Housing Tax Abatement Program. In essence, this is a tax abatement program designed to encourage private sector housing construction in targeted areas of the city. So we'll, of course, get into more details later in the presentation here. So I'll start with just a brief overview of what we'll cover tonight. I'll be beginning with just an overview of what these vertical housing tax exemptions are and how they operate, as well as vertical housing development zones as a concept. I'll also then move on to cover how vertical housing overlaps with some of our state requirements under House Bill 2003 to develop a housing production strategy. I'll then discuss recent plans to explore a vertical housing pilot program for the city-owned North Anchor site. And finally, I'll end by asking the council for some direction on how to move forward with that pilot program. So there are about 19 slides in this deck, including this in the title slide, and there will be time for questions and other discussion at the end as well. For some reason, there are there's two threes on this overview. Apologies. Clearly an error. All right, so beginning just with the concept of vertical housing tax exemptions. So what is the purpose of a vertical housing tax exemption? Generally speaking, these are exemptions used by cities as a tool to produce multifamily housing in planned areas, sort of key areas of the city where you'd want to promote that. So those planned areas are often areas that are already zoned for higher density mixed-use residential and commercial development. In Lake Oswego, you might think of locations such as our existing town centers in Lake Grove and downtown. So this tax abatement is really intended to encourage the private sector to build the types of mixed-use developments that we've already allowed in those areas of the city. It also helps to produce subsidized affordable housing units within those developments in general as a concept. Beyond housing, there's other benefits as well to this vertical housing development zone and tax exemptions. They are sort of touted for their ability to increase the assessed property value for properties that are mapped within those areas, and also their ability to increase the number of jobs, people, and businesses in those key areas of the city. So on the slide, you can see images of two different developments constructed within or constructed with the help of vertical housing tax abatement in the Tigard Triangle area over in Tigard. So these combine for the creation of 238 dwelling units. They produce new businesses and jobs on the ground floors and activated important locations of the city of Tigard that the staff in the city of Tigard really wanted to focus on. So we got really good feedback when we spoke with some of the staff over at the city of Tigard on this program. They've already had a little bit of experience with this, obviously. And they pointed out that it's one of several tools that they're using in these areas that have really been helpful in generating housing in areas where this type of housing, in particular mixed-use commercial residential, is relatively untested in terms of the market. So they really think that this is more appropriate for areas of the suburbs as opposed to Portland proper, where there might be a hotter market. I'll talk a little bit about how these exemptions work. Essentially, they provide a partial tax exemption on the building improvement value for mixed-use developments. And specifically those that include housing above non-residential uses on the ground floor. So this is outlined in statute ORS 307.858. There are specific requirements for that ground floor non-residential use. It has to be at least 50% of the project's ground floor that fronts on a primary public street. Really has to be committed to that non-residential ground floor use. There are some other sort of specifics here, but for the most part, it needs to be constructed to building code standards for commercial use or planned for commercial use upon completion in that ground floor area. So of course, you can see something we're all familiar with here at the Windward, kind of an example of what this tool is intended to produce, not necessarily saying that this tool was used to develop the Windward. However, this is the type of outcome really that the vertical housing program is designed to generate with that commercial space on the ground floor and residential units above, really activating the ground floor in the areas where it's mapped. So really, the goal is to provide opportunities for residents to live in these sort of amenity-rich areas of the city with shopping, restaurants, and other commercial services located within close walking distance. So this is a map showing the various cities throughout the state of Oregon that have started to utilize vertical housing. I don't want to go over all the cities, but you can see that there are a number of cities that are smaller than the city of Lake Oswego, a number of cities that are similar in size, and a few that are larger, like Beaverton or Hillsborough. So you can see that it is something that has been explored by other cities that are kind of, both very similar in size to Lake Oswego and, even smaller than Lake Oswego. It has been successful to a degree. So vertical housing development zones, or VHDZs, as I might refer to them, are areas where properties are eligible to apply for these vertical housing tax exemptions. So these zones can apply to an individual site or a small number of properties, or to a larger district or zone where development is being targeted. You can see on the slide, this is the VHDZ mapped in Estacada, which applies to a significant portion of that city's downtown area. Or central area, I suppose. It's important to note that for market rate construction, the tax abatement only applies to the value of the building itself. It does not include the value of the land on which it's situated. And the assessed value associated with the underlying land can go on to actually be exempted if there is affordable housing within the project. So for market rate, the land is not included. For affordable housing, it would be exempted. So the partial tax abatement that is available to properties within the vertical housing development zone would last for a period of 10 years. After 10 years, that full value of the project is placed back on the tax rolls. The exemption would apply to basically all taxing districts that do not opt out when the vertical housing development zone is established. So those types of taxing districts include school districts, soil conservation districts, libraries, the Port of Portland, vector control, a number of others. And part of the process is that the city would need to provide notice to those taxing districts at least 60 days before the ordinance to enact a VHDZ would be considered. So there would be 60 days advance notice, and they would have 30 days, basically from that 60-day notice, they would have 30 days to decide to opt out of the program if they did want to do that. So we haven't really heard that that's very common. We've only heard of one example where a taxing district has decided to opt out, and all those examples that we've seen throughout the state thus far. But we do have at least that one example. So the amount of the tax exemption increases based on the number of residential floors that are constructed above the ground floor of the project. So these development zones provide partial tax exemptions on the value of new construction or rehabilitation for 20% per eligible residential floor above that sort of ground floor, commercial or non-residential ground floor. And so there's a maximum total exemption of 80% for buildings with 5+ stories or 4 stories above ground floor commercial. So really, as you can see here, 2-story buildings with 1 story of residential, 20%, 3-story would get 40%, et cetera. Another thing I wanted to mention is that cities are allowed to add local criteria to their vertical housing programs as long as they don't conflict with minimum state eligibility requirements. A lot of times these criteria require design standards for the non-residential ground floor. Fortunately, we already have robust versions of these types of requirements in our downtown redevelopment design district, at least, kind of looking at potential areas where this could be mapped, as well as the Lake Grove Village Center overlay, LGVCO. On the slide, you can see kind of what this is intended to result in. Really kind of see that sort of open connection between the commercial space at Salt and Straw and transit facilities, pedestrian facilities directly adjacent to that space. Other things that could be included in local criteria for a vertical housing development zone would be green building certification requirements or additional incentives to produce affordable housing units. Those are some of the things that we've seen in those local criteria. So we can talk more about whether we want to include those additional local criteria within Lake Oswego if we do receive direction to move forward with a broader implementation of this vertical housing program. Once a vertical housing development zone is designated, just in general, developers of property within that area could then apply to the city. Once it's designated, they can apply to the city to receive that tax exemption for the proposed development, as long as it meets those requirements. If there were local criteria, those would have to be met as well. All right, so I'll now talk a little bit about how vertical housing relates to the housing production strategy requirements of House Bill 2003. By the way, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or if you are curious about anything along the way here. So we haven't really begun to transition into this phase of our work on House Bill 2003, so this is a bit of a preview. But once the city has adopted an updated housing needs analysis, for which we have a hearing scheduled at an upcoming meeting here on October 3rd, we will begin diving more into this housing production strategy work. As a quick summary, though, HB 2003 requires the city to adopt a housing production strategy within 1 year of the adoption of a housing needs analysis. So for Lake Oswego, that would be by December 31st of next year, 2024. Generally speaking, that housing production strategy will identify a set of actions to facilitate housing development that meets the needs of the community, specific actions to promote the development of the needs that are identified in the housing needs analysis, such as zoning changes, financial incentives, tax exemptions, and other actions, as well as a timeline for their implementation. So DLCD, or the Department of Land Conservation and Development, compiled a master list of these different housing production strategies for cities to consider for this work, with numerous individual strategies in different categories, as you can see on the screen here. One of those is tax exemption and abatement. It's one of the sort of main 7 categories that we'll be asked to look at for this work. And so looking just a little bit more in depth at that list that was developed by DLCD, you can see that one of the strategies identified there, strategy E3, is vertical housing development zone tax abatement. Their list also has information about other cities that are using the program, as well as the target affordability levels and tenure statuses that can be targeted for each individual strategy here. So if we do decide to move forward with vertical housing as a part of the city's housing production strategy, there would be opportunities for more detailed discussions regarding where to map that vertical housing development zone, whether the city should impose those additional local criteria, those types of additional considerations. There would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. So now I'll just provide a brief overview on a project where the city has an opportunity to utilize this vertical housing tax abatement. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I know you have an update directly after this meeting in your capacity as Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency. So I know you're already very familiar with this. But as you know, the city has been working for many years to develop the city-owned properties located at the intersection of 1st and B, also known as the North Anchor site. So you can see kind of where this pilot program would be mapped on the screen here, parcels A, B, and C shown in blue. And as approved back in 2021, the development contained 67 units, including 8 units that are affordable to those earning 80% of area median income. And it also includes 6,000 feet of commercial space as well. So again, as you are all well aware, there is a 2023 council goal to support business investment and job creation in Lake Oswego, and specifically an initiative to ensure that the North Anchor redevelopment stays on track. So a disposition and development agreement was signed back in 2021 between LORA and UDP, or Urban Development and Partners, the developer of this project. I don't want to go into too much detail of the history here, but earlier this year, the close date was extended till December 31st of this year, to my understanding. So UDP's progress in securing financing was being hindered by the continuing extraordinary economic conditions, including COVID-related supply chain disruptions, which led to significant increases in construction costs, interest rate increases, and inflation. That's kind of some of the reason that we are looking at this for the specific project. So this is more information, again, that you are all likely somewhat familiar with. When the project extension was granted, council / LORA, you all, asked UDP to explore options that would immediately move this project forward without compromising overall quality, rather than sort of waiting for more favorable economic conditions. So one of the things that was identified that could accomplish that outcome was utilizing a vertical housing tax exemption at that site. We were then directed to explore a pilot program to map a vertical housing development zone at that site. Some of the sort of benefits of doing a pilot program for North Anchor, in addition to those I've already explained, is that it would allow staff to get some experience with implementing a vertical housing development zone program, and an opportunity to sort of identify any issues that we experience along the way, or just, implementation sort of best practices and sort of things that we could improve with the program if it was to be more fully expanded. But, more directly, it would allow the project to utilize, the North Anchor project to utilize the tax exemption as a gap funding measure and enable its timely construction. Just for reference here, or for sort of your context, the amount of tax abatement that would be provided, or I guess the amount of taxes that would be abated through this program at the North Anchor site, talking about that full 10-year tax abatement. So total amount of tax abatement would be between $2.1 and $2.8 million. Kind of depends on what type of abatement they end up getting. We're still kind of finalizing whether or not we can count the sort of half floor that's included on the residential portion of the North Anchor site. So we're looking at sort of between a 60% and an 80% tax abatement. So that's that range between 2.1 and 2.8, 2.9 million. And that's total. Out of that sort of total, out of that larger chunk, the city would be sacrificing $640,000 under the 60% scenario, or $854,000 under the 80% scenario. And again, that's for that full 10-year abatement period. So, just compare that with all the other taxing districts combined, would be sacrificing 1.5 million with 60%, or 2 million approximately with 80%. So just to provide a little bit of context on the numbers that we're talking about here for this specific property when we talk about tax abatement. So I just want to go over the timeline that we have here for the project. We are already beginning to talk with some taxing districts in the area. Of course, need to develop program processes and checklists, et cetera. But the last major milestone was the Planning Commission update on August 14th, about a month ago. Of course, today we're having a study session at City Council. And if we were to look for a potential sort of hearing date of December 19th, we would need to provide that 60-day notice starting in about a month at October 20th or so. So that's when we would begin sending out notices and learning whether or not taxing districts would want to opt out of the program. So that covers the bulk of the content that I wanted to go over with you today. I just wanted to close the presentation by asking you all for a bit of direction on whether staff should bring forth a proposal to establish a vertical housing development zone pilot project or program at the North Anchor site for council consideration at a public hearing on December 19th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. All right, who has questions for Mr. Olson? Councilor Mbu.
Yeah. Thank you. It was very clear. I wanted to hear, is it $2 million in the 10 years? The tax abatement on.
So the sort of total amount of tax abatement would be between 2.1 and 2.9 million over 10 years total. Just for the city, though, we're talking about between $640,000 and $850,000 of abatement.
Yeah. Okay. 600. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Other questions? No questions? Councilor Burdick.
I'm just curious, what comments did the Planning Commission have?
So, we went to the Planning Commission really to talk about this more in the context of the housing production strategy, and we asked them for specific guidance on what to look for, what type of metrics we can be guiding or using as we monitor the implementation of this program to sort of guide us with our housing production strategies work. So we did not get, too much input on the, we weren't there to ask for their approval of this program, I suppose, but we were there to kind of just put this within the context of a larger sort of housing production strategy work, and also to really just give an update on what's been going on at LORA and how that could relate to our HPS work.
Did they seem to have any comments at all with using a program like this? I mean, was there any discussion around that?
I don't recall any specific comments. I mean, there was certainly there was discussion. There was discussion about whether or not this was the type of housing that we really wanted to see throughout the city, whether or not there were other areas where we might want to map this type of program. But yeah, I think there was a lot of questions just about the specific type of housing that this would produce, a sort of commercial ground floor with residential above, and whether or not, looking at projects maybe without that commercial ground floor could be an option as well. I think it's important to point out that this would not preclude the use of other tools or mechanisms through a housing production strategy. So for projects that do provide ground floor commercial in areas where we do require that to a certain extent, it does make sense. There were a few other questions about how other cities have been doing with this program. If we could get more experience, I guess, take a look at some of the developments that have been facilitated through the program. Yeah, it's the best that I can remember off the top of my head, at least.
No, that's great. And I guess that spurs another question. What have you heard from other cities, especially, around this specific program?
We've heard good things. We've been in contact with a few cities, Tigard, Milwaukee, Oregon City, a few others, in the county as well, talking about these things. And yeah, it's been very positive input. I think there are a lot more of these development zones mapped than we've known projects that have come out of them. So while there are some really good examples in cities like Tigard or Beaverton, where there are some projects that have produced a lot of housing in these development zones, a lot of them are relatively new, so they might not have really been fully utilized in some of these cities. So really just kind of reiterating that this is one of many tools that we could use as a city, and that no one tool will sort of solve everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Raff?
Yeah, moving away from the questions and more to kind of my feelings on this, I think 100% we should proceed with this proposal. I think for those of us who have been here for almost 3 years, and our newer counselors haven't been here for as long, but this has been a priority for us for a long time, and even administrations before us. It's going to be, in my opinion, kind of the crown jewel of our community in a lot of ways, not just great housing, also affordable housing, also great retail and community spaces. And being that, like you said, one of our goals that we mapped out in January was to not only facilitate this, make sure this goes through, but also support our businesses and the business community here in the city. So it's a home run on to left field, right field, and center field. And so whatever we can do to push this thing forward and get this thing to bed, I'm 100% for it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Raff. Councilor Wendland?
I would duplicate what Councilor Rapp said, with an additional part of the incentives that we need, I think, in the future to get projects like this. I talked to a developer that left the Portland area, metro area, because it was just too darn hard to get stuff built here, and they left to another area. And so the mayor has said it before. I think people have said it numerous times. We've got to get a incentive-based program if we want to retain developers and builders, and we want to have them actually complete projects. And I think it's important for us to support this, and I would support it with no more other stipulations. I think we have a very good stipulated procedure and policy in place, and then I would say that in the larger picture of things, this is a perfect project for the North Anchor site to show what can be done, and it might be leading to future projects. Because I think this is going to be a high quality, I think there's a perception maybe that people think, oh my gosh, we're now going to have, projects that are not going to be like Lake Oswego. And I think this is the type of project that will show that this is a great project, and it meets all of our standards and fits right in the community. And it's not going to be a project that anybody would not be fully proud of driving up B Avenue. So, and then just a call out to everyone, if you want to get into more of the weeds, there is a Cruiseway Fall Economic Forum with our own Mr. Olson, who is going to be a panelist. So that happens I forgot the
I want
date.
to say it's November
something.
Yeah, I want to like early November, I'll just say it without saying the wrong date.
So to continue developing, I think it would be helpful if we were there as well to help communicate to the community about the housing needs that we have. So, and they're going to do a great job of the panelists to inform us. So anyway,
That's great.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Councilor Afghan.
Mr. Mayor, as somebody who has lived in Lake Oswego for several decades, but only been sitting here for 10 months, I'm in support of this program. I'm all about incentive, and this program addresses several different topics that we as the city councilors are trying to resolve. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. Councilor Corrigan.
Yeah, I understand all the really positive things that everyone else is attracted to, and I agree with that. But at the same time, I don't want us to be surprised, because if we do abate these taxes, it will have an impact on how much bonding capacity we will have going forward for other projects that we want to complete, say in Foothills or other places. And that's a fact, and I would just like us to know and understand and agree that that's in our best interest to do that. And for me right now, it's not clear to me what that number is or what that impact will be, and I'd like us to know that before we make a final decision.
Thank you, Councilor Corrigan. I did have that kind of question. Right now, these parcels are in the East End urban renewal area, right?
Yes.
So, and they're paying no taxes because we own them. So when they go back on the tax rolls, when they go back into private ownership, that increment from 0 to whatever it is, that would go into the East End district.
Assuming it's still in operation at that time, yes.
Assuming it's still in operation. So I don't know if when we come back for the hearing, if we can get a kind of a.
So we won't have it by then, but I think I've told all of you that you gave direction earlier this year that we are going to do an update on all of our urban renewal plans, including the now in Acoma Foothills Urban Renewal District. Right. And one of the questions we will be examining as part of that strategy is what is the effect of a vertical housing tax abatement program on urban renewal. So I understand the position that it may affect our ability to borrow. Some of that I think depends on timing. Some of that depends on what goes on the tax rolls when these properties go on the tax rolls, even if the taxes are abated. And so what's the increment, in other words, in the future? Also, just as a reminder, this is a 10-year tax abatement. It's not a forever. So I think that this consideration about the effect of this program or effect of property tax abatements on urban renewal will be even more pertinent when you consider questions I know are coming your way about more permanent abatement of property taxes for fully affordable projects. So I do think this is an important question. We are going to evaluate it. I will say that is another reason to pilot it as opposed to just adopting it whole scale and then regretting the impact that you're going to have.
Right. Well, even if that's the answer, that we feel like the annual impact is so minimal that it really won't have an impact on the time it takes us to repay the bonds in the East End. I mean, I think that's
But,
kind of.
but again, I think it's something that we, as we do the update on these urban renewal districts and find out what our true bonding, our debt capacity is in the districts, we need to evaluate the potential of extensions of programs like this. Because I do think a program like this is something you might want to consider in Foothills, but before you consider it, you're going to want a full understanding of what the financial impact is on your ability to borrow as part of the urban renewal district. So I hear the concern. I think it's a very good question. I just don't think that at this point we know the complete answer to it. And I do think it's worth us making sure that we have a very solid understanding. I have a feeling that some of those other jurisdictions that Mr. Olson talked about, like Tigard, like Beaverton, have considered it. And so the other place we need to go is we need to go talk to those jurisdictions, because they do have urban renewal districts in many of the places where they also have this program. So they should be able to give us more information about what the interplay between these two programs might be.
Okay.
I just don't know. I think it's a great question. I think we need to do a deep dive on it. I just don't know the answer today.
No, yeah, not today. But when we come back for the hearing, well, so we make some.
I don't think we'll know the full answer when we come back for the hearing. No, because we don't, because these properties right now are in the East End, right? And so the Foothills District doesn't extend. I think the question comes from an idea that you might be, when you create the Foothills District, extending, yes, that's where this question,
well,
I happen to know that we have a very interested citizen who's done a lot of mapping, which is where this question comes from, which is what happens if you were to extend the Foothills District across State Street to include these properties, and would it affect your ability to borrow? The East End District is closing out. There's already plenty of cash in the East End District to pay off the debt that you have on the East End. I'm not the least bit worried about that. I do think the question about if you were going to draw the boundary for a future Foothills District across Highway 43, what would this program do to your ability to obtain debt under an urban renewal project? And part of that, again, for me, it comes back to the question of when do we start from? I actually think if you had the urban renewal district in place today, if we were going to move those boundaries, then the question would be really urgent, but we don't have those boundaries in place. So this project may be built and on the tax rolls before we revisit the Foothills.
Right.
This may be a moot question, but I do think the particulars of the larger policy question about how does this program work with urban renewal is something we need to know the answer for. But again, for me, that's another argument for,
right.
Let's try a pilot. Let's find out if it works. Because right now we're collecting zero, precisely zero on these properties.
Right.
And so for me, $200,000 over 10 years is better than zero over 10 years.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where this comes from. But this larger question of the effect of tax abatements on urban renewal is something we very much have to get our arms around, because as Mr. Olson says, we're probably going to need all those strategies to accomplish our goals, right? Because right now we don't have any way to pay for infrastructure for housing either.
Right.
And so urban renewal needs to be something in our toolkit, just like tax abatements need to be in our toolkit.
Right.
We just need to understand when you use which tool.
That's right.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I just have one quick clarification on this topic. It might be helpful. The numbers that I was throwing out earlier, between 64 and 85,000, foregone tax revenue for the city, that includes the urban renewal areas as well. So that's not just this, sort of city taxes. That's also includes the URA, but not the bond.
But the URA is going to go away in 26 or 27, which might be about the time this project gets its C of O. So.
Well, that really was just.
So that's very
That's my
estimated.
question.
Yeah.
I was just asking about the impact on the East End, and you answered it.
Yeah, there's no impact on the East End, really. I mean, there is, as Mr. Olson says, but there isn't, if that makes sense.
So yeah, it was just that simple question.
I think it really has to do more with our ability to borrow for future urban renewal, not current.
Yeah, separate question.
It's a very good question. We need to know the answer to it.
Yeah, okay. I had a talk with the Mayor Fitzgerald down in Wilsonville, and it was a positive conversation. They have established kind of two different areas of the vertical housing development zones, and one situation very similar, just where they had a developer on the line, much like UDP, who was just having a really tough time making the project pencil. within a, existing urban area. And so they designated, actually, there's 3 separate parcels, the particular parcels that developer was interested in developing. And now they're still working through that with them. But it was good to see that, the city of Wilsonville kind of employed the same logic. They were just difficult sites for whatever reason, to develop, and they implemented but they also did come up, I think, seeing your comment about it sounds like these floors are not all of the same square footage, and I think they incorporated a solution, to that problem into the way they calculate the credit, which is in their resolution on the policy. So maybe something to take a look at to average it out, I think is what they did,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely doable. We just don't really have the exact sort of breakdown of what that looks like yet.
Right. Okay.
Well, I just,
No, yeah,
Councilor.
no, I just, what I wanted, that we hold our horses. I think we are talking about a pilot program and it's only North Anchor, because I would totally disagree of handing out people, because the side we have the Tiger Triangle, and here it's a different game. People want to build in Lake Oswego. We cannot ask for money from the public. We want Bond to build a library, but we are handing out. Ale, come on, we are not at that position where we are. We are talking about a site that before we came, people wanted to build North Anchor. It's failing. Now we have people who we think are very committed to do something, and we are trying to find a way to help them move on. But the other, places, we're not going there right now. I think we have to be, another council will probably decide on that, but we should move on this, ask staff to work on this. What can we do to help, the UDP and to do this project? That's my.
So we're hearing strong support from the council moving forward.
Yeah.
Seems like a great, good use and good opportunity both for this project and as we look forward for the housing production strategy as well. So yeah, thank you for the good work.
Clear direction, appreciate it. And yeah, it's always great when we get developers saying, this is what would help right here. We're going through this whole project next year of trying to figure out the things that would help. So it's great when we kind of can respond quickly to that too.
We appreciate that. We know we have our UDP partners here, and we do want to be very responsive to the needs that they were very explicit about and what they need to make this project happen. I think this whole council really is excited about seeing this project move forward, and we're willing to make all the contributions that are needed to move the ball forward. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
and Mayor, just as a side comment, we have a great bond rating and we have great financials in Lake Oswego. So a deal like this, where I share Councilor Corrigan's concern on knowing the realities, but I just don't want anyone to think that, we have great credit history and lots of bonding capacity, excessive amounts that we could spend. So anyway, because of good fiscal management.
That's right. Thank you, Councilor Wendland. So moving on to information from council. I just have a couple of things. One is a letter that we've been asked to send in support of the Portland Bureau of Environmental Services application to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a NOAA grant. This is the Restoring Fish Passage Through Barrier Grant Removal. This is for the Tryon Creek Highway 43 Culvert Replacement Project. We just wanted to see if everyone would be okay with the city joining in support of that project. Okay, and sending a letter. Okay, very good. Okay. We, last night at the Sustainability Advisory Board, we discussed the reclaimed water project and other sustainability features as part of the wastewater plant. We have an update coming up on that of the meeting of Mr. Hooper that he is running and controlling the whole. We are going to hear so much from Mr. Hooper at one meeting because Ms. Bennett will be gone, and he's going to run the meeting. He's going to talk about wastewater the whole time, and we're going to hear all this good stuff. So anyway, we got a little preview of that SAB, and I think it's going to be great news for all of you. Well, enjoy hearing the good work that he's been doing. At the C4 table, some of you may have seen an article that came out around tolling. The discussion continues, and the team here at the city and in other cities have been doing a good job following along. It remains as bewildering as ever, the whole thing. But essentially, the city here, we submitted a list of projects. These are called Nexus projects, the projects that kind of relate to mitigation, that would be needed from tolling. We also responded, so simultaneous to what's going on with this general tolling. As you know, ODOT has backed off on the third lane of I-205, kind of recognizing that there won't be no, tolls to pay for a third lane I-205, but there will be tolls going across the Abernathy Bridge and probably tolls on the interstate, bridge up north. But then there's another program called the Regional Mobility Pricing Program that's separate from the toll program, and that program is still moving forward, and that program also functions basically like a toll with gantries. And so now ODOT is out, and that's all of I-205 and 205. So the plan had initially been, I-5 and 205. And so now that's the next step on that is an environmental analysis, or the EA and the assessment on the RMPP project. And there's kind of option, it's like the parking, there's option 1 and option 2, then option 2 has 2 sub-options underneath it. This seems to be the theme of these things. Anyway, so this is all still moving forward. While the subcommittee in the legislature on this whole tolling topic, they have not convened yet since the session ended. And so they're getting together to talk about, all of this. And then there's a report due to the governor in December on tolling impacts as well. So anyway, that's a C4 update. Sorry, if you have any questions, let me know. Councilor Mboop and I attended the Youth Leadership Council retreat over the weekend on Saturday. We have the new class. Yes, Councilor Mboop was slingshotted.
What?
He was slingshotted.
Oh, you were slingshotted?
Yes.
Oh.
He tried to be the first to go, but we wouldn't let him. We slingshot Councilor Mboop. Yes, that's right. There's a video. It's entertaining. We have a great class, the largest youth leadership council we've had, just under 20 students now, some returning and some new. Ms. Bennett, Quinn, and Jamie have done a really good job now convening the youth. We're doing a social here this next week with all of our youth advisors that sit on the advisory boards, plus the Youth Leadership Council and the Youth Action Council and the Teen Advisory. So all of the kids that advise the city, we're getting them all together for a social, which I think is a great idea. And the kids are very energized for the year ahead. We sent out an email. The school board would like to have a joint meeting with us this fall and then one in the spring. So if you haven't yet gotten back to Ms. Linder on that, please do. We're looking at a date in October. And then finally, I attended a recovery summit convened by Clackamas County. They did a great job putting kind of a 2-day panel of experts together from California, Texas, Canada, and then here locally on a kind of a recovery model. And they're looking at creating a kind of large-ish recovery center somewhere here in the county that would help people both transition out of, specifically targeted at the homeless population, so people that are living unsheltered and also suffering, from addiction to move them out of homelessness and into a path of recovery. And it was it was a really well put together summit. So then we appreciate the county leadership on that. Does anyone else have any updates? No, Councilor Corrigan.
I'd just like to take a minute to thank Parks and Rec for putting on 14 fantastic concerts in Foothills, Millennium, and Westlake Parks this summer, starting with music and lasers on the 4th of July and finishing with a wonderful concert of the Portland Festival Symphonic. It was really wonderful, and we really appreciate all their excellent work on that.
Thank you for calling that out. Thank you, Councilor Corrigan. Councilor Bird.
And I also want to thank staff and all the vendors who came to the the Emergency Preparedness Fair last Thursday, I believe it was. It was packed when I came in here, and so I just wanted to thank everyone. It's such an important issue. It seemed like everyone was having a great time. I am disappointed I couldn't race the mayor again
Next year.
with the firefighters and the kids, but next year I'll take them on.
These kids, too many kids doing it.
And also just say that on the Saturday, the Lake Oswego Sustainability Network is hosting the Sustainability Fair. So something to do on Saturday.
Special speaker that will be there. Yes, I know we'll get you those. Okay, anyone else? No? Okay. Is that it? No? Okay. Okay, with that, I'm going to adjourn the city council meeting and call to order the redevelopment agency meeting. Okay, yes, and we'll take a quick we'll take a quick recess and then we'll come back into this meeting. Okay, just
20
minutes.
minutes?
Five-ish,
minutes?
five-ish minutes. Yes, I'm gonna write you the thing. Otherwise, you're getting blue, you know.
That's great.
No, I'll get you. Okay. We are now back in order, meeting as the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency. First item of business tonight is a North Anchor project update, and we welcome our friends from UDP. Mr. Kress, we'll turn things over to you. Good evening.
Thank you, Laura Ward, for having us this afternoon. There we go. Thank you for having us to give an update on the North Anchor project. So I brought along Curtis Pissarro, who's our Senior Project Development Manager at UDP, and sorry, what's your name, Lincoln? Lincoln Walker, who heads up our investor relations and also does a lot with the capital markets within our organization. We are really excited about this project, and even though it's not our largest project, it has our entire team's focus, and it's, I would say it's the most exciting thing that we're working on in our firm right now. We are committed to partnership with the city. We appreciate being in partnership with the committee, and as a core tenet of good partnerships, we're committed to transparency and working with you all and answering any questions you have whenever you have them, so that you fully understand the work and how it's proceeding. I'd also say that we are committed to expediting and moving the project along quickly. It's a different experience working here in Lake Oswego. Usually we are doing a lot of hurry up and wait. We found the staff to be quite responsive and committed to working hard to move this project forward, and that's a good problem to have. Frankly, our consultants sometimes have trouble keeping up because they're not used to it. And I'm not just talking about Portland. We work in Northern California and up in Washington State, and I would just say that the city team here works very hard and is aligned with what I see the city council's goals, very much so, which is also nice. We're just going to go through quickly. I'm going to go through the two projects. I don't have a lot of bullets to share. I'm just going to show some pictures and some narrative. We'll talk about where they both are. Curtis is going to talk a little bit about where we're at with the schedule. And then Lincoln's going to give an update on the where we are with the financing. So we're in the, we've just recently had a pre-app with our design review modification for the apartments and the hotel. I will say there's not a lot to say about the apartments. We've changed the roof slope. And you won't really, I don't think anyone will really notice that change, honestly, unless we put it up against the other. And we are working through very specifics and materials changes, but nothing that's outside of the design guidelines. So not a lot to share with the apartments. We're just going in to get approval for that change in roof slope, and we expect that process to be fairly seamless. With the hotel, there is more work going on. So we are balancing the intensity of use within the hotel. The feedback that we receive from our operator and outside consultants is we need to really provide more services within the hotel. So we've expanded the spa and fitness area within the hotel. Broadly happy with the restaurant facilities that we've already proposed. So those are a couple of the major changes, and the other piece of that is balancing that with the parking that the hotel has. So whereas the apartments, we are able to fully park and get that into a good spot, it's been a little bit more challenging with the hotel. And frankly, part of that challenge is our operator has expressed that having a lot of parking in the hotel is not necessarily a big deal because they typically do shared parking agreements for the hotel. However, we are working towards complying with the city code to make sure that we provide the parking that the city sees is necessary. And therefore, we've engaged in a parking study. That study will be complete in mid-October. We'll just starting to get data back on that study, so we'll be able to respond to that, which may mean we make modifications to our design. Even though we've done our pre-app, there may be some additional modifications to the design as we go through that process and balance the parking requirements with the addition of the spa and several rooms to the hotel. And that's really solving that puzzle is the big variable that we're facing now with the hotel. So we've got Hacker fully engaged, Kittleson on the parking studies fully engaged, Geotech, water experts, everyone, because we're talking about subterranean parking and how we can best facilitate the needs there. So there's a big team working on that right now. And otherwise, the externally, largely the key components that I guess components of the hotel that everyone loves from the external standpoint are continue to be there. The arch, the activation, the restaurant. We will be making some changes with the spa, so the spa will provide more fenestration and interaction with the street along one facade. So that's one change that will be visible from the exterior. But otherwise, we'll continue to activate the street. There won't be any changes to the height or those items. And I forgot to mention, in addition to the intensity use, when I talk about intensity use, is really FAR. There's a maximum FAR on the site, and we're pushing up against that because to add this spa, that counts against the total floor area ratio requirement. So we're working through that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Curtis, talk a little bit about actually, I'm going to turn it over to you, Lincoln, to talk a little bit about where we're, actually, let's do it this way. Let's talk about the schedule, and then I'll go back. Sorry.
Sounds good. Yeah, as Eric was discussing, we've been working through a number of changes to, the prior approvals and adjusting on the apartments, the roof slope, working with our engineers and architects to figure out how that all works. Also working through a number of other value engineering, opportunities on both projects to try to make the project pencil. And one of the biggest pieces has been the parking and working through various scenarios there. We engaged Kittleson Associates to create a parking study to look at 3 other hotels and what that would result in terms of the parking that would be required for a hotel like this. They are expecting to finish that in mid-October, and then we will we expect to submit our modification application shortly thereafter. And then that would sort of start us on the rest of the process towards a public hearing, hopefully in December or January.
Thanks, Curtis. So we're still targeting that December timeframe for our public hearing, and we hope to achieve that. We are on that timeline. The parking puzzle is requiring a little bit more time than we initially anticipated, which could push us into January, but December is our target. And Lincoln can give an update with financing.
I think as probably many of you are aware, the debt markets continue to be a challenge. We have, of course, the Federal Reserve meeting tomorrow. I think everyone eagerly awaits every one of those meetings. I know I do. We expect probably more of the same. I think we've probably discussed with many of you in this forum how challenging it's been, especially since the fortunate collapse of First Republic, which was our primary lender. So we continue to work through, thankfully, our relationship managers with now Chase Bank and continue to work with that relationship. We have had interest. Interestingly, I was in New York City early part of the summer. Private debt financing continues to be actually a hot investment option, but also for us and our project, a potential option for financing, although our preference would be to go with a regional bank like a First Republic. So, that continues. That's a bit to some degree a bit out of our control, but what we can control are the equity conversations, which is, as Eric mentioned, my main role at UDP. So pretty much every week, my goal is to talk to someone new or have a follow-up with someone that we've been speaking with, Sid, Mr. Sidaro, and I, along with another colleague, were at the farmers market here in Lake Oswego last month. We did that previous year. We've also joined the Chamber of Commerce, doing everything we can to get the word out about the project, generate interest both in the business community and private equity community as well, amongst community members, who I am one. I live in Lake Grove. Most recently, in a few meetings, I think perhaps bear sharing with you all here, we had an on-site tour about a week and a half ago and went to both our site, of course, but also the Windward and Mercado Grove, which are the two apartment communities that we see as most comparable to our own project, with a capital partner. And he's coming in again this Friday to look at our underwriting with us. These are all good signs that there's general interest out in the market, which is what we want to see. And in this case, interest both on the hotel and apartment side, which is great to see. So welcome your questions. We'll continue to be out in the community meeting with folks, and looking forward to having this project come online.
Yeah, so we're pleased to continue to see interest in what is generally a very difficult financing environment. So I think this project stands out. We do have a couple of hurdles. One is the Portland Association, which is so we have to differentiate Lake Oswego for regional or non-regional partners who've come in and looked, and once they've set their foot on the ground, they understand the clear distinction. So it's really just going to get them into the city and understand what's going on. So we have had interest from folks outside of the region, and so we're not just depending on regional sources. So that's been positive, as long as we are clearly distinguish, what the uniqueness of Lake Oswego, and then also partners up and down the West Coast that are more familiar with the area and have shown interest. So, the big questions that come up are, interest rates are the main conversation. So, where interest rates going to go is because they underwrite to an interest rate environment. So that's what we're working through. And then on the, as Lincoln said, on the debt side, it's really working with banks who are, regional banks are struggling and having a hard time, but eventually the only way for them to earn money is to lend. So eventually they're going to have to free up and actually do what they do, which is lend money to high quality developments and projects like this. So we are available for questions. Thank you for having us again, and take your questions.
Yeah, thank you all for the updates, and we appreciate the good regular communication we've been having throughout the summer and now into the fall. I just have one question about the parking. We had a study session about the CFEC rules and the Phase A and so I'm we've kind of talked about, so why is the city mandating any parking in this in the frequent transit area?
Based on the pre-app that we did have, it was clearly stated that no parking is required.
Okay.
So I think that's clear. However, with this development, there is the expectation from the hotel operator that there would be some type of parking to be able to accommodate the hotel guests on that site. So right now, UDP is going through a parking study to kind of really try and right fit the right amount of parking spaces that they do need on site.
Okay, so just for your own edification, right? And working with your hotel partner, not because the city is mandating
So, Your Honor, though, the other thing I would add, Sid's been very politic. I think that one of the things I appreciate about UDP doing this study is I think that's been an issue of some concern to the neighborhood. So I think that they're a good faith effort to address an issue of significant concern to the neighborhood. I also have a feeling, if I'm a hotel operator, especially at this price point, that making sure I have enough parking spaces for my guests who will drive is a very important issue. So I think it sort of is in the intersection of good faith on their part, the interests of the neighborhood, and the needs of the hotel operator that's causing them to address parking, not the city's code.
Right, okay, so I just want to be clear. So there is no code requirement.
Well, we still have the code in place. Remember what you all decided to do with CFAC is that you decided to leave the code in place, but it's essentially preempted by state law. So they're making an effort to comply with the code, even though they don't have to.
Oh, okay. I mean, for sure, I really appreciate the work, with the neighborhood, but I know we had these other topics about the permanent easements and things that are just seem to be very thorny issues. And if these are big obstacles, if the parking is the main obstacle, I just want to make sure we're not, unnecessarily putting ourselves up against these barriers and incurring further delays.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to be good neighbors. So we want to put as much parking into the building as we can. And in transparency, we are going to cut it as close as we can to get as much parking into the building as that we can reasonably pencil. And we're putting a lot of effort towards that. Just to be clear, our hotel operator is not requiring on-site parking because the way they typically operate, because it's a hotel, they work through shared parking agreements that are on 1 to 5 year leases. And it is very common practice for that parking to be attained. It's highly unusual for them to have it difficult to get every location is different, but they have assured us that it's highly unusual for them to have difficulty getting shared parking agreements put in place because of the use of the hotel, like the timing of the use. Very different from apartments. We didn't even approach pushing back, trying to do something with the apartments. We feel like the market requires that we fully park the apartments, and that's what we did from the beginning, and that's what we will, we need to do. Right. Hotel's a little different because they're valeted. A lot of times the guests themselves don't really care where the parking is. And so we have to park them, because they're valeted, we have to park them off street. So we absolutely have to have the shared parking agreements. You can't have your valet park a car on the street. I think that's kind of a misnomer that I've heard come up, but that's not what they do. They park it and if it's an area where it needs to be secured, they find secured parking, or we pay for security to make sure the car is safe. A guest who has a car that's been broken into is an unhappy guest. So those are, they're parked in private lots or sometimes public lots through shared parking agreements, and typically they're just not hotel parking hours, and it can be very flexible because they're valeted. So the cars can be moved during the day. They can be pushed around such that they facilitate a sometimes stringent shared parking agreement. Although they're typically 1 to 5 year leases.
And so you're pursuing those agreements?
We will. Right now, we're looking at because of the parking study, we're trying to determine if we're going to have, the parking that we have programmed in there is going to be adequate. In addition to that, so we're not clear on exactly how much parking we need, but we will also be pursuing those shared parking agreements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the parking study that Kittleson's doing, just so I'm.
Yes.
Is that to use to go back to the neighbors and say, don't worry, Kittleson says this is enough? Or is that to do that and to go to the city and say, we meet your code?
Could be both. So we meet. So
we are requiring you to have the study.
Well, it's under the code. The code says that we have to, although the state supersedes that requirement. So yes.
But you're doing it.
Again,
anyway.
they've opted to do it because.
Voluntarily.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so we voluntarily opted to meet the code. In order to meet that code, we needed a parking study that shows the utilization to meet that code. That would make, I think, life easier for everyone if we're able to, if the parking study shows that we're able to meet the amount of parking, and therefore the neighborhood community is satisfied, they're not alarmed, and it's easy that way. The other route is for us to secure all those shared parking agreements offsite, which we will certainly need to, we will likely need to secure some shared parking agreements offsite regardless, because during certain weekends, there will be kind of a surge maximum use. And again, if we can't park a car, we can't sell a room. So we will, pursue those, and those will be under 1 to 5 year leases. The city code does not require that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for walking through that. It's kind of odd, we're listening to what we appreciate that you want to be a good neighbor. We certainly want you to be a good neighbor. And we also are listening to what the sticking points are as we work through providing incentives and other things to make this project go forward. So I just want to fully understand. We can speak in plain language about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. Frequently, we're put in that position, frankly. It's not just here. That's kind of what our job is to try to meet a number of requirements from a number of stakeholders.
Okay.
It's a primary part of our job. So sometimes we can't make everyone happy, but at least we can try to satisfy everyone. But we start with, a vision that will make everyone happy, and try not to erode that. Sometimes we have to make some compromises.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Councilor Raff.
Once again, you guys are carrying this forward with grace and patience, and we really appreciate it. I think we've demonstrated our desire and commitment to the project. You obviously have done that. So if this, it won't, but if it fails, it's not because of the commitment from the two parties, right? So you guys have done a great job keeping us updated. A great monumental change from 6 months ago when we asked you to give us, kind of be more vocal with us and telling us what you need. So props. I think when it comes to the parking study, you've been around in these chambers long enough to know that we have a very unique community that likes to be highly involved in our projects, sometimes to the detriment of process and timelines. And so while we appreciate you doing the parking study to make everybody feel warm and fuzzy inside, we still have the ability to do what we want and do what's in our eyes, the greater good for the community. In my mind, I'm not speaking for the council, I'm speaking for myself, this is the greater good than, because oftentimes we saw today with some public comment, we have some neighbors that want to derail a park project under the guise of sewer lines. So we'll get around those, just continue to be committed to the project like we are. But I did find one error in your presentation. Can you go to slide 1, please? Props to your editor. The river and the lake are never that blue. So the color correction, while appreciated, is not entirely accurate. So now I know you're doing this for marketing purposes. I'm sure you use this picture in a lot of your sales decks. So I now apologize for putting that on record. So anyway, thank you for staying committed to the project.
Thank you. Maybe just at the right time of day, at the right angle. Funny. Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to assure everyone that the hotel will be adequately parked.
Yes.
It's not marketable without adequately parking the hotel. I will say apartments are sometimes marketable without adequately parking, but not these particular apartments, frankly. And the same with this particular hotel at the rate we're asking, there's not going to be tolerance for inadequate parking. So that's really a non-negotiable with our operator. They understand that. They're also confident that we'll be able to satisfy that problem. As much as we can get on site, great. The balance we will take care of.
Thank you. Councilor Boop.
Yes, and I to continue where you left off, I'm pretty sure the Planning Commission won't let you off the hook on that. I learned the state allowed me to leave a fence. The city said, no, this is our code. No, this is if it's the code, the code stay, you will have to respect that. Like, and also for good neighbor, the greater good is not to throw our neighbors under the bus. They are complaining, we are defending. That's why we are here. You are not elected by UDP, we are elected by the neighborhood there, and we are defending them. So, you have to make sure that the parking is okay, that we are not parking in people's houses and stuff like that. And as you said, I won't be in a hotel where I struggle finding parking. Neither would I buy an apartment where I cannot, of the price I know here, where, the affordable is 80% AMI. I won't have an apartment without parking. So, but that being said, you are doing a wonderful work, but I also think that the city is doing the great work. We are pushing, we are creating stuff to give abatement and stuff, and the banks are not going to change. I get loans in this market. I am remodeling the thing. You do. We are all business people. We cannot say, oh, we are waiting till the rates are okay to do this. It's a project. At some point, it has also to happen. Like we are giving 6 months. And when I see here, you say December, January, when we discussed, it was the end of December that, we have the thing. In my mind, I honestly cannot continue to defend that we are going, because probably in December, if you say, oh, can we go to June 2024? I mean, it's me talking. I have, my view on this is at some point you will have to find the financing and do the job, or, it's the market. Like, we are talking capitalist view. You can do a project or you can't. If you cannot do it, it's because time is very consuming in business. We cannot just extend a project forever. At some point, it has to have an end. And I would defend you on everything because I know you are committed. I even myself try to find people interested in this project, but it has to have an end. That's my view. We cannot continue to extend it to 6 months, another 6 months, another 6 months. I'm not part of that, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. But maybe we got the kind of the entitlement or the development review timeline, but what is maybe Mr. Sen can remind us of the closing timeline?
For the deadlines for the closing?
Right.
The closing for the residential component, the board extended that to December 31st, 2023, so end of the year. The closing on the hotel, per the DDA, is December 31st, 2023. And then we also have our off-ramp in the DDA, which is we have a Scrivener's error in there that currently says November 30th, 2023. However, our schedule of performance says December 31st. And so at some point, we will need to come back to the board and ask for an extension of those dates to be able to continue to follow through with the development review process, which is in play right now. And we would expect if submittal is, if they submit their application by mid-October, which is the schedule, we should be able to get at least one public hearing in December of this year. And also with the vertical housing development zone, we expect that to come back in December. So we feel that the progress is being made, and then we also have those things that, we've been working on since June to get this going, but, there's some of those things are outside of our control, and we're working hard to meet those deadlines.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yeah. Thank you for the refresher on those deadlines. Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share my colleague's sentiment from a different perspective. I think both sides have stepped up in their commitment to make sure everything is resolved as quickly as possible and move forward. As far as the parking is concerned, I know we had a discussion about it. As Councilor Rapp said, we will do what's the right thing to do. Having said that, I also could imagine what kind of a nightmare we would have if Windward and the property across it did not have any parking there. So it's sort of like I understand and I feel the pain that the neighbors will have to go through, but at the same time, this is a project that everybody wants to move forward. If I remember correctly, in May, you said that you had never intended to have the full-blown parking on site and you were always planning to have off-site parking. So I think everything you've said today is very consistent with what I had heard before and what our commitments are. I do have a couple questions. If I remember correctly, back in May, you had came forward with several suggestions and several requests from the city. Has the city pushed back on any of those items that you had requested?
The city has largely cooperated and pushed forward on the suggested items. Yeah, I'm trying to.
Largely means all of them.
Probably all of them. I'm trying to think that there may have been one that we didn't, but yes, has been very supportive, and we have not come back. We don't have any more requests, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every request you have made to the city, we have considered it and said we look at this favorably. Let's move forward. Okay. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Afghan. You got Councilor Wendland.
Just an appreciation for all your work and to Sid and Jessica's teams for helping get this through. I think we're all excited about moving this forward, and we appreciate all your help. Where are we at with, if, let's just say Phil Knight decided he needed 63 rooms in Lake Oswego and he wanted to finance the project, and then somebody wanted to have his relatives stay in the apartments and he wrote a check. Are we ready with the plans other than the minor? I think parking is a minor part of this whole thing. I mean, you'll get it figured out. You guys always do that because it's a necessary evil to have, and you'll figure out how to make it happen. Are we pretty much through the process as far as having the plans and the architectural? I mean, are we going to find out in January 1st that, okay, now that we have kind of things approved from the parking, now we can start on the architectural plans? And are we kind of finalized with those things in the permitting process? Can we get a permit signed? I mean, how does that, where are we at in that process?
Yeah, so whenever we change the parking, we update the plan. So that's one of the difficult things. And so to be clear, we are investing money and time right now. So it's not, we are committed both in our time and in our money to this process. So, it's in the spirit of partnership that I appreciate the sentiments that I heard today that the city would, come along with us in that journey. So the drawings are, every time we make a parking modification, we update the drawings so that we can expedite the process, as opposed to going through a study and not submitting a new set of drawings. I mean, we have a proposal submitted to the city, a set of design review drawings that were submitted with the pre-app that have a proposal for parking in parallel with doing a parking study. If we if we were not under a expedited process, we would do the parking study, wait for the results, and then submit the drawings. So it's coming at, due to, you know, there will be, I mean, we're working real time and spending extra time and money so that we can expedite the process. So we appreciate the urgency. We heard that loud and clear, and we are doing everything we can to move this process as fast, forward as fast and thoughtfully as we can. The thoughtful part is, you know, going through the additional part with the parking. We want to be thoughtful and be good neighbors, and we, you know, have people who live here in this community. We have friends in this community. We want to do right by the community and also keep the project moving forward.
Right, so let me ask the question, are we on track? I mean, we're going to ask for an extension, I just know that part. I mean, but are we able to, if things line up in December, how we are anticipating, if everything's positive, when do we pull permits and when does the dirt get moved?
Yeah, for the residential, we expect to fully be ready to pull permits and move dirt. Now, the hotel and the residential are attached. So, I mean, we'll pretty much be done with the residential, and it'll really, it's a lot of it's banking on the hotel and getting that part of the approval for permits. So there is an unknown there because we are going through a design review process. We are making requests. Sorry, Councilor Afghan, I maybe have misspoke. There are requests that are not coming to City Council, but are coming to the planning review to talk about potential additional FAR or.
So Eric, you all submitted building permits for the residential already, right? So it's a question of just submitting the modification. So they're already in process on the permit process. So as soon as the plans land and the financials land, they can move. On the residential, the hotel, as he says, you submitted building permits for the hotel too, I think, but those will have to obviously go through a more substantial review because of the modifications.
They're going through the design review modifications. So that's kind of the variable here. So if things flowed right through in the design review modifications, so both parking and the intensity of use with the FAR, as soon as we solve that issue, we do have a public hearing. If things go through okay with the public hearing, I don't know, do you have a sense that when part of it is a city variable in terms of getting it, the city getting approved?
I would place some time open.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that building permits are running us, because of a staffing shortage, building permits are running us a little bit long. So anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks in general. So once their decision's final, assuming it's final at the Planning Commission though, we can start the next day, but it's a couple months probably, realistically. And leaving the schedule open means somebody else's project gets delayed. So, there's consequences to that. So I hear what you're saying, but I think that we also need to understand that there are other businesses operating in Lake Oswego.
I totally understand that. We've been doing this particular project for a very long time, and it's a very public-oriented project. All I'm asking kind of is, do you think, well, let me ask this question. You can say yes or no. Will we have dirt on our projects in 2024?
Yes, I think so if we were in December, if we move through design review and we can get our permit in March, then we will immediately break ground as quickly as possible, coinciding with that permit issuance for the residential. And then we have, 3 to 6 months after that for the hotel.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So then, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilor Wendland. Did you have a follow-up, Councilor Afghan?
Yes, Councilor Wendland asked questions that I heard the answers, but I got confused. So I'm going to ask black and white question. Residential building, do you have your design complete? It's a yes or no?
Yes, complete and submitted.
Have you submitted for the permit? Yes or no?
Yes.
So they're ready for construction as soon as they get their permit. For the hotel, because of the parking and the services that you are trying to increase inside the building, your design is still in progress. So you do not have a design to submit for permit, correct?
We've submitted for permit. We've submitted a design for permit. That design may need to be modified due to the results of the parking study.
Okay.
Yeah.
So potentially, if those changes don't require to go back through the permit process, you would be ready to start construction as soon as you have the permit in hand.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, we have staged it up so there's a gap between the residential construction and the hotel construction. But yes, in theory, we'd be ready to start construction the moment we have permit in hand. We're expecting that we get the permit, will coincide financing and closing on financing and all of those things within a few weeks of getting the permit. We'd close initially on the residential, and then 3 months later, commence with construction on the hotel.
I understand the project phasing, and I understand you can't just tear up the dirt everywhere, anywhere. But I wanted to be clear on Councilor Wetland about you have design, you have submitted for permit, and as soon as those permits are in your hand, you can start construction.
Yes. Yeah.
You just may need some money, but other than that,
Yeah,
right?
That's a different question that I did not ask.
Right.
And sorry, just to clarify, though, we'd have to close on the property before beginning construction, which is, there's a couple things on the schedule of performance, just like making sure that there's financial capability and some other things that we'd have to make sure we go through and comply. So it's not quite turnkey, but close.
Yeah,
No,
I'm sorry. There's that small item.
I think the point is that we don't want to get to January and go, okay, great, now we've got that, and now we've got a 12 to 18-month process of going through. We're we want to just make sure that everyone knows that we're, and I think it needs to be noted, again, the UDP is investing a lot of money in this. And so in the prior go-around that we went, we got pretty far down the line without really any money being invested in the project, and then the person disappeared. So in this case, there's mutual interest to get the project done. You're spending money like crazy to get this done, and so I think it should be noted that non-city money is tied up in this project, and city money is, we have an asset sitting there, so, and what do they say, time is money? Is that what has that ever been said before?
Speaking of which, we're trying to be
Something
done
like
by
that.
5:30.
So, anyway, I know Mr. Walker is fastly closing in on getting lots of people to invest, so it's encouraging under these circumstances, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wetland.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Really, we appreciate the update. Thank you, Mr. Sin. All done. Okay, we just have one other piece of business here on the LORA agenda. That's approval of the LORA meeting minutes from June 20th and June 27th. Is there a motion to approve the LORA meeting minutes as written?
I move to approve the LORA meeting minutes as written.
Second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes 7-0. And with that, the meeting of the Redevelopment Agency is now adjourned. Have a good night. Thank you. Thank you.
So
4 minutes before I got nervous, I forgot your name. It's close. John, it's really.